Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. On the show tonight.
In Chicago, when you feed your ballot into a machine on Election Day, you're essentially putting it in a ballot box with 2 compartments.
Tomorrow is, of course, Election Day, and our digital series WTTW News Explains answers the question, what happens to your ballot after you vote?
We have just one more day.
Enough is enough.
Politicians make a final appeal to voters. What you need to know before heading to the polls.
And you won't just be choosing politicians. We break down the first question on tomorrow's ballot, the Workers' Rights Amendment.
Everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die.
City Council approves Mayor Lightfoot's $16 billion budget after tense debate.
Controversy at Jones College Prep following the school's handling of a student's Halloween costume.
A major medical merger with help from Walgreens, that and more from Cranes.
In the early hours of tomorrow morning, a total lunar eclipse will turn the moon red. 2 local astronomers explain where and what to look for.
Creativity is at the centerpiece of the new Native American exhibition at the Field Museum in Chicago.
We look towards the next 10 to 15 years and this new master plan and vision for the zoo and what we want that to be.
And we take you inside Brookfield Zoo as it celebrates 100 years since its groundbreaking.
But first, some of today's top stories. City Council members approve Mayor Lori Lightfoot's 2023 budget proposal. The $16 billion spending plan passed by a 32-18 vote. Here's what the mayor said right after the election year budget vote.
With the passage of this budget, those who voted yes reaffirmed our responsibilities as fiduciaries of the public trust. Fiduciaries are not just particular areas of geography, but of doing the right thing for our city overall.
And coming up in the program, reporter Heather Sharon joins us to break down that budget vote.
A new Bears stadium in Arlington Heights could move one step closer to reality. The town's trustees are voting on a Chicago Bears stadium pre-development agreement tonight. This is a non-binding framework for the team, which plans to build a $5 billion stadium and mixed-use development in the northwest suburb. For the first time, it drafts possible public financing options, including tax increment financing and other possibilities. The Bears signed a $197 million purchase agreement for the now-shuttered Arlington Park International Racecourse back in 2021. The Village says tonight's vote is to provide the Bears with, quote, some assurances regarding our intentions and predictability of process so that they can make a purchasing decision later in 2022.
Election Day starts bright and early tomorrow. Voting opens at 6 a.m. across the entire state and polls close at 7 p.m. Chicago election officials are encouraging voters to double-check the location of their polling place at chicagoelections.gov or even Google the phrase, where to vote. Past polling places have consolidated and moved as a result of the new city ward map. Election officials also recommend that if you used a vote-by-mail ballot, you should not use a postal mailbox tonight or tomorrow because your ballot may not be postmarked in time. Instead, use one of the 50 official ballot drop boxes to make sure your vote is counted. And before you vote, be sure to check out the WTTW Voter Guide. That's at WTTW.com/voter guide.
And coming up in the program, on the eve of Election Day, a last-minute look at the races.
But first, what exactly happens to your ballot when you vote? The answer right after this. Stay with us.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Tomorrow is Election Day, finally. Politicians and local election authorities have been preparing for the big day for months. Voters will decide races up and down the ticket, but have you ever asked yourself what happens to your ballot after you vote? WTTW News explains the journey of a Chicago ballot.
You've done your research, made your choices, cast your ballot. Then you cast a couple more on behalf of your dead relatives. Hey, it's the Chicago way. Just kidding. So, you earned your I voted sticker. What happens next? In Chicago, when you feed your ballot into a machine on Election Day, you're essentially putting it in a ballot box with 2 compartments. Ballots with write-in candidates stay separate in one compartment. Election judges will count these by hand at the end of the night. All other ballots are scanned and counted by machine. Lucky for the judges, otherwise it would be a lot of counting. Once the polls close, the machine spits out a tape of the totals, like a receipt. Election judges work in bipartisan teams at each precinct to keep an eye on everything. They certify things went smoothly and that ballots weren't compromised when they sign the receipts and other legally binding documents. Then they use a cellular device to transmit the totals downtown to Election Central. That's when we begin to see the results. But it's not all high-tech. The paper ballots that got fed into the machine don't get tossed. They go into a big blue hard-shell case on wheels, packed up with a pretty bow, or rather a security seal, to ensure nobody messes with the precious cargo. From then on, anyone who touches the case has to sign a chain of custody form, like evidence in one of those TV procedural dramas. Thousands of suitcases from every Chicago precinct go to a warehouse where they stay, signed, sealed, delivered for at least 22 months, just in case. Some will be opened and reviewed as an extra check. By law, a state audit recounts votes from 5% of all precincts. Procedures differ slightly for voting by mail, early voting, and those who vote from overseas, but not by much. All legitimate ballots are counted, kept secure at every turn, and end up in the same warehouse for safekeeping. So wear that sticker with pride and peace of mind. Happy voting.
Happy voting indeed. If you haven't already cast your ballot, tomorrow is your last chance because that's how Election Day works. If you're still undecided or unclear about what all is on the ballot, you've come to the right place. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with a rundown of what you need to know heading into Election Day 2022. Amanda.
Yeah, Brenda, so think of this chat with you as a little bit like cramming before a final exam. Now, think of it maybe more like a giant public test, and the results, of course, have implications that will last for years. Tomorrow, voters in Illinois will decide contests ranging from who will be the next governor to whether the state will amend its constitution. I know that coming up, we'll hear from folks on both sides of the union-backed constitutional amendment, so let's jump right in with another contest at the top of the ballot. That is the race for Illinois governor between incumbent Democrat J.B. Pritzker and Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton. They run as teams. And then Republican State Senator Darren Bailey and his running mate, radio host Stephanie Trussell. Both teams spending time today on the campaign trail. And Bailey gained statewide attention early in the COVID pandemic with protests against Pritzker's executive orders temporarily requiring some businesses and schools to close and executive orders mandating masks be worn. Bailey ending his campaign on that theme.
J.B. Pritzker uses our kids to make political points. He locks school children out of their classrooms, and he tries to twist their tender minds with ideology in his quest to be the most left-wing governor in America. Now his minions are looking to impose vaccine mandates on our children. JB is a thief. No, absolutely not. That's right.
Bailey was surrounded by what his campaign called mama bears. You heard him at the end there. This was at a morning event in suburban Oak Brook. He says emails of public health officials discussing vaccines show that Pritzker is planning to add the COVID shot to the list of vaccinations Illinois students are required to have in order to enroll in school, unless they have a religious or a medical exemption.
Another experiment is in the works. Large-scale child vaccination. JB thinks that parents are dimwits as he lies to them.
Pritzker, though, says his administration is not considering a COVID vaccine requirement for Illinois students. When asked about it at a campaign stop in Springfield, the governor responded, "That's not something we're looking at doing." He says it's a last-minute attempt by Bailey to win votes after a campaign centered on misinformation.
Darren Bailey and the Republicans want to take this state backwards. Darren Bailey wants to end workers' rights to organize, and he wants to end the state minimum wage. Can you believe that?
Bailey's campaign says that it's Pritzker who's saying ridiculous things to rile up his base. Bailey, as a state senator, voted no on the Pritzker-signed law that will raise the minimum wage statewide to $15 by 2025. But in one of two televised debates this campaign season, Bailey said he would not rescind that minimum wage law. Pritzker says Bailey is otherwise unfit for the state's top job.
He founded a school that teaches young people that slave masters were good to their slaves. That teaches in 2022, teaches young people that women are inferior to men. This man shouldn't come anywhere near the governor's office, and we're not going to let him, are we?
What you heard from both candidates is characteristic of the whole campaign. Bailey says Pritzker is a tyrant who is too liberal. Pritzker says Bailey is too extreme and too conservative.
Strong words from both sides. Amanda, let's move down the ticket some. What other big races are there?
Well, there are a lot of them. The U.S. Senate seat currently held by Democrat Tammy Duckworth. She's facing Republican Kathy Selvey. Now, WTTW held a forum on that. You can watch it on our website. And also, all of the statewide constitutional offices. Attorney General Kwame Raoul versus Republican Tom DeVore. Chicago Tonight also had a forum with those candidates. Also, we have Comptroller. That is Susana Mendoza versus Republican Shannon Teresi. And Treasurer, for that, it is incumbent Mike Frericks versus Republican, that is, sorry about that, member of the Illinois House currently, Tom Demmer. Then Secretary of State. This is the only open seat because Democrat Jesse White is not running again, meaning neither Republican Dan Brady, he's a longtime state legislator, nor Democrat Alexi Giannoulias, a former state treasurer, are going in with the incumbent's advantage. Now, Democrats do have one advantage, though, and that is money, both from unions as well as a whole lot of funding from Pritzker, who is a billionaire, that he's contributed to candidates up and down the Democratic ticket, including propping up the Democratic candidates for Illinois Supreme Court. Suburban voters in the collar counties will have a rare opportunity to vote in one of two Supreme Court races, and the outcomes of those could flip control from Democratic hands to Republican of the state's high court for the first time in decades.
And Amanda, of course, a lot of these races, we've heard a lot about them over the course of this campaign season. What about legislative races?
Well, of course, we've heard a lot about this on the national level because control of Congress is at stake, and there is one sign that Democrats are worried about some of the seats they currently hold in Illinois is that this past weekend, Vice President Kamala Harris stumped here. The president also campaigned in the suburbs on Friday. So you've got the 6th, 11th, 13th, 14th, and 17th districts. Those are among those you might want to look out for. And then as for the Illinois legislature, all 177 General Assembly seats are on the ballot. Roughly 100 of those are contested, and of those, expect about a dozen or so to be truly competitive, including a bunch of suburban seats. Now, Brandis, Democrats currently hold supermajorities in the Illinois House and Senate, and they're looking to hold on to those.
Okay, Amanda, thank you.
Happy voting.
Happy voting. Up next, a deeper dive into that workers' rights amendment that you'll see on your ballot. Stay with us. Do you think there's been sort of a rethinking of how those events happened here in Chicago?
I made a promise to myself in my career that every year I would make a piece of art dedicated to the memory.
Got into a zone of mentor to children. See what we can do to kind of elevate each other. We all we got at this point.
I'm using my past to push forward, to build a movement to create the world that we all want to see.
As you just heard, a lot of important decisions for voters to weigh tomorrow, but the first one will be on a state constitutional amendment that could have major ramifications across Illinois. The so-called Workers' Rights Amendment aims to codify in the state constitution the right to form a union and collectively bargain over a host of issues. It would effectively prohibit any future anti-union legislation like right-to-work laws. And joining us are Mark Poulos, Executive Director of the Indiana-Illinois-Iowa Foundation for Fair Contracting, and Jeff Risch, a partner with the law firm Amundsen Davis. And we should remind folks that the amendment needs a simple majority of all voters, or 60% of the voters who actually vote on this issue, as opposed to leaving it blank, in order for it to pass. And we thank both of you for being here. I'll start with you, Mark Poulos. Remind viewers, what would passage of this amendment effectively do?
Well, thanks for having me tonight. I really appreciate it. This amendment is pretty simple. If you want workers to have more power, if you want workers to have more money in their pockets, if you want workers to have a safer working environment, you would vote yes on the Workers' Rights Amendment. The Workers' Rights Amendment would create a stronger collective bargaining state. In strong collective bargaining states, employees earn 14% more, are 9% more likely to have health insurance coverage, are 3% less likely to live below poverty, are 3% less likely to rely on Medicaid, and 2% less likely to rely on food stamps and government assistance. And finally, they contribute 8% more in state income taxes. If that's the type of state that you want, then I would vote yes on the Workers' Rights Amendment.
Jeff Risch, how would you advise voters to vote on this amendment?
Vote no. It's a clear no. This is not actually called a workers' right amendment on your ballot. That's a name given by the labor unions that support it. And I actually refer to it as the great public union giveaway. This amendment, it is arguably not going to apply to private sector workers. This is not the private construction worker on the highway. That is protected under, those rights are protected under the National Labor Relations Act that's been existing federal law since 1935. Make no mistake, this is all about trying to protect big labor and allow them to seize more control in Springfield, thereby raising taxes on every child, working household throughout the state of Illinois.
Mark
It's a terrible amendment.
Is that what this is really about? Public sector unions, government unions?
Nothing could be further from the truth. I'll start with the first part of this, which is the text of the amendment that appears on the ballot starts with the terms, employees shall have the fundamental right to. That's how it starts. There are protections in this amendment for every single employee, whether you're a private sector union employee, a public sector union employee. In fact, if you're a non-union employee in the state of Illinois, there are protections in this amendment vis-a-vis the text. There are protections for everyone that is an employee. Every employee in the state of Illinois is on the ballot tomorrow.
All right, so what Jeff is saying, I think, though, is that the NLRB already affords some of those protections. But I want to read some of the text of the amendment that you started to read there, Mark. So employees shall have the fundamental right to organize and to bargain collectively through representatives of their own choosing for the purposes of negotiating wages, hours, and working conditions, and to protect their economic welfare and safety at work. Jeff, your worries about the language here, specifically the phrase economic welfare has come under fire as being pretty broad. What could that mean?
Well, economic welfare has unlimited meaning. And what I look at, again, I totally disagree with Mark in his position that the National Labor Relations Act doesn't already protect private sector workers. With respect to public sector workers, there is no limit to what a public sector worker can negotiate and actually receive at the bargaining table through this amendment. No limit, and it would forever permanently ban the state lawmakers on a local level or a state level. It will permanently ban state lawmakers, local lawmakers, from enacting law to try and reform and heal the state of Illinois' financial woes, particularly the public sector union pensions. You can Google public sector union pensions. It's $130 billion in debt, unfunded vested benefits, and it's just going to continue to rise because of this.
Let me pick up on that, because there's a pension protection clause in the Illinois Constitution. Several years ago, there was a massive bipartisan effort to make some reforms to the pension system because of the underfunded nature of the system, and the state was pretty hamstrung. The state Supreme Court ruled any changes unconstitutional. Mark, are you worried that in a case of emergency, if legislature needs to take up some kind of bill that pertains to some of these issues, that they're going to be hamstrung because this is codified now in the Constitution, much like the Pension Protection Clause?
I just want to be clear about what this amendment is and does. It is an anti-politician amendment. So all of these concerns about what politicians may or may not do or what they may or may not do in Springfield, the whole point of this is to take it outside of the hands of the politicians and to put it inside the hands of workers. Workers spend most of their waking hours in the workplace, yet they have absolutely no constitutional protections there. The courts have spoken over the last 100 years and have said both at the state and federal level, workers do not have fundamental constitutional rights. So every time a worker has a problem, they need to find a legislator and get, in the state of Illinois, 60 House members, 30 Senate members, and a governor willing to sign a bill to create a safer workplace, or to pay them more money, to put more money in their pockets. That's just insane. The fact that we have a First Amendment right to freedom of speech, a Second Amendment right to bear arms, a Fourth Amendment right against illegal search and seizure, but we have no fundamental rights in the workplace is absolutely archaic in 2022. And tomorrow we can change that to workers.
And Jeff Risch says some of this is to head off future things like right-to-work laws. The former Governor Bruce Rauner had tried to gain momentum for right-to-work laws. Do you see anything like that happening in Illinois down the road?
Well, first, I think what Mark just painted is the Trojan horse behind this amendment. That's why this is a Trojan horse. This is going to lead to higher taxes for all workers. As far as right to work, I don't know if this amendment can actually survive legal challenge on cementing a non-right to work status of Illinois. That will be litigated, but this is what I can tell you. Illinois is not going to become right to work anytime in my lifetime or our children's lifetime. It's not happening. The unions already have their teeth and their claws into these politicians in Springfield. That's clear. It's clear to any voter going into the ballot box tomorrow. But here's what's going to happen. I mean, here's what I would say on right to work. Why are the unions so fundamentally against preventing employers from firing employees because that employee doesn't want to turn over part of their paycheck to the labor union? Right to work, that's right to work. And the unions want to continue to permit being a non-right to work state. It allows employers in Illinois to fire their employees.
You're addressing some of those fair share laws, and there's been all kinds of legal challenges around all this. So a very heady question for all voters tomorrow. We thank you both for sharing your views on it. Our thanks to Mark Poulos and Jeff Risch.
Thank you.
And now to Brandis for a look at today's vote on the city's budget. Brandis.
In Paris, City Council members approved Mayor Lori Lightfoot's $16 billion spending plan by a surprisingly narrow margin today, even though the plan was designed to avoid controversy during an election year. Instead, the plan took fire from all sides. That did not stop Mayor Lightfoot, who is running for a second term, from claiming victory.
We must never forget our role as fiduciaries, particularly in this time when people are still hurting, still healing. We all know there is more work to do to meet the moment, but also to continue on the path of righting historic wrongs and giving true meaning to equity and inclusion.
And WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now with more. Heather, approximately half of the alderpeople who voted against this budget are among the most conservative members of the City Council, and they said that the spending plan did not do enough to address crime. We're taking a look at the vote on your screen right now, but here's Alderman Brendan Riley blasting the mayor's efforts to stop crime on the CTA.
So what do we have to show for this CTA investment? A system plagued by service disruptions, delay, crime, and filth. Ridership scared to death to use our train system after rush hour, and many more scared to use it during rush hour. Drug use, violence, sexual assault, strong-arm robberies, they're out of control and they become the norm. But please vote for a budget to subsidize this dumpster fire.
Heather, why did so many conservative members of the council vote no?
Crime remains a hot button issue. It remains higher than pre-pandemic levels in 2019, and most conservative alderpeople believe that is due in no small part to the fact that the Chicago Police Department has hundreds of vacancies, and they wanted a plan as part of this budget to retain those officers. The mayor declined to give them one.
So the plan also drew fire from the progressive members of the City Council. Let's listen to Alderwoman, or a few alderpeople. Here they are.
But we could have done more. We could have done better, right? And we should.
This mayor made promise after promise after promise to enact a policy agenda that would undo the harm that Mayor Rahm Emanuel caused, and caused too by this council chamber, and that would instead begin to invest in the things that the people of the city of Chicago needed to thrive.
So Maria Haddon and Carlos Ramirez Rosa, why did they vote no?
Well, the biggest issue turned out to be Mayor Lightfoot's refusal to create a Department of the Environment, even though she campaigned on a promise in 2019 to do just that. Instead, the city will have a new Office of Climate Equity and Environment to step up the city's fight against climate change. That was not enough for progressive alderpeople like Alderman Carlos Ramirez Rosa, who said this is just another in a litany of broken promises the mayor made to progressive voters. That will be an issue in a few months when she faces voters.
Okay, so we've talked about what some aldermen would have liked to have seen in the budget that is not there. What does the budget include, Heather?
Well, it includes $26 million more for homelessness services. It includes $3 million to help people access abortion care in Chicago now that Roe versus Wade has been overturned. And it includes a $242 million advance payment to the city's pension, the first time the city has paid more than it is absolutely required to in its history.
And I'm sure that made some watchdogs happy. That's where we'll have to leave it. Heather Sharon, thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
And you can read Heather's full story on our website. It's all at WTTW.com/news. Up next, celebrating a century of Brookfield Zoo. But first, a look at the weather.
And there's much more ahead on the program, including how to watch the total lunar eclipse early tomorrow morning. But first, the Brookfield Zoo is celebrating a big milestone. It was a century ago when it first broke ground and began construction. Chicago Tonight's Joanna Hernandez takes us to the zoo to learn more about its past and present.
A lot has changed in 100 years. In fact, the Brookfield Zoo was at the time just a big plot of land.
We sit on 235 acres of land that are owned by the Forest Preserves of Cook County.
It could take some time to walk around the zoo, so Leah Ripe is showing us on wheels.
Can you just talk to me about, just the evolution of the zoo?
So the land was donated by Edith Rockefeller McCormick to the Forest Preserves of Cook County with the premise that it must be built as a zoo. So over the course of time, then of course it took quite a while to put these habitats in for the different species.
On October 27, 1922, dozens gathered to break ground on Brookfield Zoo.
I love looking at the historical photos and then seeing how people really dressed for the occasion to come to the zoo, right? So actually the opening of Brookfield Zoo, we'll be celebrating that 100 year in 2034.
From giraffes to rhinos, the zoo is home to more than 2,500 animals. Dr. Michael Atkinson is now the head of the zoo.
In the time since the zoo first opened, so much change has taken place here, and it was conceived as a modern zoological park with open and spacious exhibits, and that's really what we're trying to do as we look forward to the centennial celebration, is take it back to that level of what's new and exciting and innovative.
Dr. Atkins says his team is focused on a master plan, a project to revitalize habitats for the animals.
So we are headed into Tropic World, South America right now.
South America.
So, yes.
Have you been to South America?
I have, many times.
Oh, wow. And you were saying right here that you love watching the kids.
It's always such a joy watching kids come through. There's just something about a waterfall that children love, so they're often so enamored with the water that they don't even notice the monkeys behind them.
Tropic World transports you into the rainforest of 3 continents. It's one of the exhibits on the list for renovation.
On the outside of this building, we'll be putting in new outdoor habitats for our gorillas, our orangutans, and some of our smaller monkeys. And really, this building is an incredible building, but we also want them to be outside. We want them to have that space to play and roam outside.
You can say Atkinson is a modern-day Dr. Dolittle. He started as a veterinarian at Brookfield Zoo, and the rest is history.
That thing hanging below him there is actually, it's a fake log. So we've got an incredible team that builds enrichment devices. So these are different kind of feeders that pop food out at different points in time, all intending to keep them stimulated, keep them active, keep them busy like they would be in the wild.
One of his passions is the conservation of animals. He says Brookfield Zoo operates multiple conservations around the world.
So many species would no longer exist in the wild if it wasn't for zoos and other conservation organizations breeding those populations for reintroductions.
You know, when people walk into the zoo, what do you want them to experience?
We want them to have fun, and we want them to walk away inspired. We want people to come here. We want them to smile. We want them to have a great day with their family or friends. And when they're in that kind of mental space, we know that they're going to hear our conservation messages. They're going to hear our stories about the importance of these animals and the care that they receive.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Joanna Hernandez.
Always good to see our friends hanging out there at the Brookfield Zoo. And of course, the Brookfield Zoo officially opened its doors to the public in 1934. And still to come on Chicago Tonight, findings from a new report says Chicago's affordable housing problem is not as bad as other big cities. That and more from Cranes. Controversy at Jones College Prep following the school's handling of a student's Halloween costume. We talk about the impact and what's next for that school. A total lunar eclipse will turn the moon red in the early hours of tomorrow morning. Two local astronomers tell us where and what to look for. And creativity is at the centerpiece of a new Native American exhibition inside Chicago's Field Museum. But first, some more of today's top stories. Candidates for elected office make their final pitches. Polling places across the state open at 6 a.m. and close at 7 p.m. tomorrow night. Election officials strongly suggest checking the location of your polling place because it most likely has changed. Go to chicagoelections.gov or just Google the phrase where to vote. And don't forget to check out the candidates on our WTTW voter guide. That's all at WTTW.com/voter guide. And that long line you saw today may not just be early voters. It's quite possible that the line was Powerball hopefuls buying tickets for the record-breaking $1.9 billion pot. Your chances of holding that winning lottery ticket are 1 in 292 million. But somebody's got to win at some point eventually. The drawing is at 10 o'clock tonight. Best of luck. And now to Brandis for some of today's top business headlines. Brandis.
Paris, thank you. Walgreens backs a deal to purchase a medical center company. The owners of a landmark hotel on Michigan Avenue are hunting for a buyer again. And a new report finds Chicago's affordable housing problem isn't as bad as some other cities. Here to go behind the headlines is Crane Chicago business reporter Danny Ecker. And Danny, let's start with Walgreens. The Walgreens-backed Village MD is purchasing a rival medical care company in a $9 billion deal. What do we know about this purchase and its impact?
Well, Village MD, which is backed by Walgreens, is a primary care provider. Summit, what they're acquiring, owns medical practices and urgent care centers. So the combination of these two just makes a much larger provider of healthcare services that's going to stretch across 26 markets. It's in line with what Walgreens and other retailers actually are doing, which is positioning themselves as an entry point into the healthcare system. Walgreens has been adding primary care centers to its retail locations in the United States, and it's also launched a program to enroll patients in clinical trials. So, Village MD is really the vehicle that Walgreens is using to grow the scale of that effort, and this is one of the biggest moves it's made so far in that effort.
So next up, Blackstone Hotel back up for sale after a failed attempt last year. Why the sale now? And Danny, does this have a better chance at following through this time?
Yeah, they couldn't get a deal done last year. COVID was still hammering hotels at the time. Now we're actually coming off of 6 months of pretty strong leisure travel demand downtown. Occupancy has been much better at downtown hotels. We'll see whether that brings out more investors. Still a sale here, if they can find a buyer, would probably be not the greatest deal for the owners. They paid just under $60 million for this hotel in 2016. They spent another $12 million renovating it. And now the bids are likely to come in at less than the original purchase price. But we have seen a run of hotels hit the market recently from owners that are trying to take advantage of a good stretch of numbers for these hotels. And, you just have to keep in mind that the prices here are still likely lower than pre-pandemic values of these properties.
Right, and that includes, it sounds like, the sale of the hotel at Navy Pier as well. So lastly, a new report finds Chicago's lack of affordable housing isn't as bad as some other big urban centers. Tell us more about this report and what it found.
Yeah, the report looked at data from 2019, and it stacked up affordable housing needs of the 75 most populous metro areas. And the takeaway for Chicago was that housing costs have grown more slowly here than they have in other major urban areas. So the area in Chicago, by comparison, is more affordable. And it really showcases what's one of Chicago's biggest advantages, which is that it really is an affordable place to live compared to other major big U.S. cities. So, there's obviously still a shortage of affordable housing in Chicago, but I think when you look at Chicago stacked up to other big cities compared to other major metros, this is a big positive for the city.
Okay, Danny Ecker at Cranes, thanks so much.
Thanks a lot.
Some students at Jones College Prep High School are demanding their principal be fired. They're concerned about how that principal responded to a student who wore a German military uniform costume on Halloween. The costume was widely interpreted to represent a Nazi soldier. The principal has been removed pending an investigation by Chicago Public Schools. CPS says, quote, "This incident caused harm to many students and staff, and it is completely inconsistent with our values as a school district. It also comes at a time when hateful speech and hateful attacks are on the rise, especially against Jewish Americans." It's the latest incident out of Jones College Prep involving its principal, raising questions about the culture at the school. Joining us now are Nora Flanagan, an English teacher at Northside College Prep, a member of the Illinois Holocaust and Genocide Commission, and a senior fellow at Western States Center, in which she co-authored a toolkit called Confronting White Nationalism in Schools. Gabi Josephson, a senior at Jones College Prep High School and co-president of the student organization Jewish Student Connection, and Ariel McGee, a senior at Jones College Prep and student body president. Thanks to all three of you for joining us. Gabi, let's start with you, please. What was your reaction when this video of the student started circulating online?
I was shocked. It was definitely a surprise for me to see the student in person wearing this costume. It made me feel hurt for seeing him walk like this through the halls of my school, which I consider to be a safe space for me in a place that usually comes without hate. So seeing this peer of mine walk through the halls in a place that I feel safe in the same, like in a very similar uniform that the people who committed a mass genocide against my ancestors, including my great-grandparents, was truly traumatizing.
Nora Flanagan, there were people who viewed the incident as anti-Semitic, and then there were others who took note and argued that it, was actually a 1940s military communist-era costume, and whether or not the student was actually goose-stepping. What's your reaction to some of that argument?
It's troubling that anybody would want to nitpick which decade the uniform came from, and I don't even know that we need to spend a lot of time on the actual student's actual intent. I think we have to look at impact. I think we have to primarily talk to the students who were impacted, the students who are here with us tonight, to talk about how they felt that day, and staff members and additional students who went to the administration and said, this is harmful, this feels unsafe. Because there is absolutely nothing more important than for students and staff and families to feel safe about those students walking into the building each day. And they were telling their principal that they didn't feel safe, and he wasn't listening. He not only wasn't listening, he was telling them that they should feel fine, and how they felt and what they thought they were seeing wasn't really what they were seeing, which is about the worst response I can think of.
Ariel, there was a student walkout today at Jones. You weren't able to attend, but organizers say that it was to protest how the administration handles racial and ethnic discrimination at Jones. What have you been hearing from students, especially students of color, about what the culture is like at that school?
Yeah, as a senior at Jones, and I would say a leader in the community, a lot of students have felt that they're pretty unsafe at the school as a whole, and not just from this one isolated incident. Jones has had a culture that hasn't made students of color and people of just marginalized identities as a whole feel very safe. And so that was a big issue for a lot of students, that they felt, one, that their security in the school was not very strong, but also that administration was not really supporting them when they came to them with issues.
Gabi, similar question on that note. What has been your reaction to how the administration responded to this latest incident?
I was definitely frustrated. I think that there was a lack of accountability and that the reactions were more just damage control, and they weren't really addressing what happened as a result of what happened, but more because of the outcry that was kind of led by both Jewish Student Connection, but also the Black Coalition, who played a huge role in organizing the walkout today. And so I was definitely very frustrated to see that this instance of anti-Semitism was not discussed until almost 2 days after. And I don't think this is the first time, it isn't the first time that this has happened at Jones. So I think that there's a strong need for better accountability in responding to acts that happen.
Nora, you co-authored a toolkit on how schools can address white nationalism. What's your assessment of the way the school initially handled this incident?
The principal's initial email to, I believe it was staff and then students and families, I can only describe as culturally incompetent. It was hurtful. He waxed nostalgic about his own travels to Germany in the 80s. I have no idea what that had to do with anything. And it completely not just disregarded, but denied what students said they had experienced, which is, as I said, about the worst way a school can respond is to invalidate what students are saying they're experiencing. And they were hearing from families as well. And then it seems like he doubled down. This isn't someone who should be in charge of a school in a city like Chicago, anywhere really, but especially in a city like ours where we are working hard to improve access and equity and respect and safety in our schools.
Ariel, you and Gabi, have been in talks with the administration in light of all this. How would you like to see the school and the district respond?
Yeah, so I actually just recently got out of a really long meeting today. And one of the main things that we highlighted is that we want a lot better education across the board. Gabi can talk to this as well, but we want students to understand what anti-Semitism looks like and how to identify that as students. But we also want students to understand what other things like microaggressions and how other communities at Jones that have historically been overlooked and not given as much attention as they should be, how we can protect these groups and how we can help these students. So we think that starts with education, educating our teachers as well as our students as to how to best respond when there are cases of discrimination at school, and then how to speak up, how to have situations like this where we had a sit-in today and protest whenever we feel like there is something that isn't being handled right at school.
Gabi, the principal has been suspended pending an investigation. Is that enough?
I honestly don't know at this time. I need to see how this new administration responds to future acts and also how they work with student leaders to implement new measures that prevent acts of hate from occurring in our community again. We must take instances of hate in our community much more seriously, and I think that starts at the core but also builds up to implementing more education in our community.
Nora Flanagan, reports show, as we've mentioned, that anti-Semitic attacks and rhetoric are on the rise. What do you make of all of this whole moment right now?
Well, the moment we're in, didn't come out of nowhere. This has been a buildup for the last several years. Similarly, this incident at Jones didn't come out of nowhere either. These events have been documented and reported and talked about, and students and staff and families have sought action. So one of the big lessons here is that we can't wait until it's something as blatant as a student performing Nazism in a Halloween costume contest to act. We need to start listening sooner. We need to listen to the students and staff and families along the way as these buildups and microaggressions surface in school communities. We can't be satisfied with, well, this isn't who we are, or that's not what that meant, or I'm sure they didn't mean, I'm sorry you felt hurt. All of those non-apologies and ways of not addressing the issue are what got us here in this conversation right now, in this moment where the incident at Jones is so shocking and so blatant. That didn't come out of nowhere. That's been building up for years, and anybody who attends or works at Jones will attest.
And I'm sure the students at Jones will keep us apprised of the situation going forward and how the new administration responds to this. For now, that is where we'll have to leave it. My thanks to Nora Flanagan, Gabi Josephson, and Ariel McGee for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And now to Paris for details on how to watch tomorrow morning's lunar eclipse. Paris.
Brandis, if you have election anxiety or just generally can't sleep, gaze your eyes up at the sky. In the wee hours of tomorrow morning, a total lunar eclipse should be visible, with the moon emitting a very autumn-like orangish glow. And joining us to discuss this phenomenon and when and how Chicagoans can catch it are Geza Juke, Director of Astronomy at the Adler Planetarium, and Chicago Park District astronomer and educator Astro Joe Guzman, who conducts public astronomy sessions in city parks. Welcome, both of you, to Chicago tonight. Geza Juke, when we stare up at the night sky around 3, 4 a.m., what are we going to see?
Well, you're going to first see that the moon is going to be a full moon, and then it's slowly going to start getting dimmer. And you might sort of see that there's a little bit of a bite out of it. And as you progress closer and closer to 4, it'll get dimmer. And then at 4 is when, or 4:16 is when it begins to enter the total eclipse phase.
So a total lunar eclipse. And Joe Guzman, tell us why it's going to emit this red autumnal hue.
Hi, Paris. Glad to be here. The Earth's atmosphere acts as a prism and blocking out and scattering the blue light rays coming from the sun. And it bends it, refracts it, and that longer red wavelength bathes the moon in a coppery crimson color. We can't determine how deep it's going to be. It all depends on forest fires, clouds, volcanic ash. But this one promises to be a really spectacular one.
And I mean, normally the moon reflects the sun's light, so it's going to be reflecting the light of sunrises across the globe. Am I correct?
Right, exactly. So as normally the light just comes unimpeded straight from the sun to the moon and then bounces off to the Earth. But in this case, because the Earth is going to be right in front of the moon, blocking the sun, blocking the direct rays, all that light that's coming from all the sunsets around the entire planet is going to be coming and bathing the moon. And so you'll see the beautiful red.
Kind of a unifying moment. Joe Guzman, how rare is this exact event?
Not as rare as you would think. There are at least twice 2 lunar eclipses a year, sometimes 4. It happens right when the moon is always full, never in partial. And then there's solar eclipses that follow it pretty soon, about a couple of weeks afterwards. So some parts of the world are going to get a partial solar eclipse.
Oh, that's interesting. But not this part of the world. In Chicago, tell us the best spot to catch this.
So the beauty of lunar eclipses is that they're something that can be seen everywhere and by everyone. And so the best spot would be someplace that has a nice view of the western horizon. So
because the moon's going to be pretty low in the night sky at this point.
Exactly. The moon's going to be fairly low towards the end of the night, and so you'll want to be able to see the horizon.
And we're kind of looking right now at a chart showing the times that you're going to see the different phases of the eclipse here. Joe Guzman, is the weather going to hold up, and is the light pollution in Chicago going to prevent us from seeing this how we might see it, say we were up in the North Woods or something like that?
Paris, how many times have we been clouded out for total lunar eclipses? So many times. But tomorrow promises to be decent for once. And we can do partly cloudy skies, and that's A-OK. City lights has no impact on watching a lunar eclipse. It's so bright, so vibrant. You can see it in downtown Chicago. It's fine. It's a naked eye event. Bring your family out. This is a rare eclipse in terms of being an election day eclipse. Never in the history of the United States has this occurred. So go out and vote if you haven't voted already. And if you have a pair of binoculars, bring them out and they'll enhance the experience. And if you got
not like a solar eclipse. You can actually look at this one with your bare eyes.
Yes, safely and securely. Bring out a telescope. It'll bring you right up close to the surface of the moon. And you can see the shadow of the Earth just slowly creeping across the face of the moon.
Geza Juke, any events in Chicago where folks are going to be collectively getting together and watch this?
Well, it's pretty early in the morning, but we are holding a virtual gathering, our Sky Observers Hangout. You can find that at the Adler's YouTube channel. And just a chance for folks to get together and talk virtually, hear a little bit more about lunar eclipses, what the best way of seeing this one. So we're going to be starting that somewhere around 3 in the morning.
And I bet you many folks at the Adler are going to wake up and join in on that virtual conversation. Joe Guzman, you were mentioning to me before we went on the air that the lunar eclipse is awesome, but that's not the only thing that viewers might see in the early morning hours. What else might we see in the sky?
At no extra charge, at 4:26 a.m., the ISS, the International Space Station, will exit the Earth's shadow, that same shadow that is now covering the moon. For 2 minutes, it will be 41 degrees high, and you can use your fist to estimate how high degrees are. And it will last, and it's so bright, it'll be minus 2.6. That's pretty bright in astronomical terms. And you'll have bright Mars practically overhead with us, and we'll see that as well. You'll have Aldebaran, a red star giant. The night sky is so chock full of stuff. How could you not love astronomy?
So you get a whole multimedia show for the price of one total blood moon eclipse, or whatever we like to call it.
Sure do, yes.
All right, well, we'll look forward to that, and if you're up, don't forget to catch that at 4 a.m., and our thanks to Geza Juke and Astro Joe Guzman. And we're back with more right after this.
Coverage of science and technology on Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Joel M. Friedman, president of the Alvin H. Baum Family Fund.
The Field Museum recently renovated its Native North America Hall and drastically shifted its focus. The new approach emphasizes storytelling and contemporary art as well as historical items from the collection. The exhibition space is called Native Truths, Our Voices, Our Stories. Producer Mark Vitale visited on opening day, and here's another look.
There is a new focus on the land, on contemporary art, and on storytelling. The new Native North America Hall has a very different vibe than the old, outdated hall. It might make you look and think twice.
I am from Acoma Pueblo in New Mexico. I'm an advisory committee member, have been since the inception of this project. It's been quite a humbling experience working with the other advisors and the museum staff.
We started reaching out to different artists and communities, and so in the end we've worked with over 150 community members from all across this country and Canada. It's their story to tell. You know, our role was basically to facilitate telling the story, helping them to select things from our collection or talking about what our visitors might feel. It's like a dialogue between us and folks, but it's really their stories that you're going to hear.
We see each of these items as living items. They are created through prayer and song and rooted in a deep family and community history and culture. And so it was very important for us to tell our own stories in our own voice, not only the advisors, but engaging other of our Native American brothers and sisters in this process.
The exhibition is permanent, with one section devoted to the Native community in Chicago. But some galleries will rotate, giving space for the depth of experiences and creativity of Indigenous people. All of it is meant to correct the old exhibit, which opened in the 1950s.
At that time, the anthropologists, the curators, you know, they had this perspective that, oh, their cultures are going to disappear. And so we better accumulate everything, all the material culture that we can, to preserve that way of life and showcase it in our museum. And it was a lack of understanding of how strong and resilient Native peoples have been, and that they were not going to disappear. You know, they resisted from the very beginning.
That's one of the important outcomes of all this, is to let America know and let the world know that Native people, Indigenous people are still here. You are on Native land. We are on Native land. We are on the land of the Creator. It's a beautiful place, and it is sacred to us. There's more work ahead, and I'm hopeful that the museum will continue to work with Native communities so that they can see the collections, that they can repatriate those items that need to go back to our respective tribal communities.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Mark Vitale.
Native Truths is a permanent exhibition at the Field Museum, and this being Native American Heritage Month, the museum has a number of upcoming related events, including a celebration this Saturday. You can find out more on our website. We're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Monday night. Please join us tomorrow night live at 7. Special Election Day coverage. We'll have the latest on voter turnout.
Plus city, state, and national races with analysts and our Spotlight Politics team. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm pleased to give back to the community through numerous charitable initiatives.